If someone were to ask high society who Lady Josephine Kingston was, most people would have a hard time answering. Some would simply say, "Oh, she's the sister of the beautiful Miss Charlotte," because the real star of the family was Lady Charlotte Kingston. Charlotte had everything society admired: extravagant dresses, sparkling jewelry, and a beauty that seemed made to be admired. Josephine was the opposite. She dressed simply, pinned her hair up without much care, and spoke little. Charlotte would enter a ball like a spectacle. Josephine, on the other hand, would enter like a quiet visitor, and that never bothered her until the day she met Lord William Hitchcock. "Look at your sister." Mrs. Kingston was annoyed. Charlotte spun in front of the mirror wearing a bright green dress full of embroidery. Josephine wore a simple blue cotton dress. "You look like a governess," her mother said. Charlotte laughed. "Mama, Josephine doesn't want to get married." Josephine looked up from her book. "I never said that." Her mother sighed dramatically. "But you never try either. If you dressed up like Charlotte, maybe some man would be interested." Josephine calmly replied, "Charlotte has been dressing like that for 3 seasons and still isn't married." Charlotte stopped laughing then, and their mother was shocked. Josephine rarely talked back, but when she did, it was impossible to ignore. It was the day of the high society ball. And like every good season, there's always someone who stands out. And this time, the one in the spotlight was William Hitchcock, the phenomenon. Tall, elegant, and the owner of an impressive fortune, he drew attention in any ballroom. The young ladies competed for his dances, the mothers vied for his attention, but Lord William seemed indifferent. He danced when it was polite to do so, made conversation when necessary, but never showed real interest in anyone. Charlotte Kingston believed it was only a matter of time. "Men like him just need the right woman," she would say to her mother. "And do you believe you're that woman?" her mother asked. Charlotte smiled and replied, "Naturally." Josephine listened to these conversations from the corner. She knew who William was. She had seen him a few times at the balls. She was very observant and had a curious talent. At the parties, Josephine always found the quietest corner: a chair near the wall, a table set apart, or a spot by the balcony. And she would stay there, observing and going unnoticed. At the balls, Josephine felt out of place, but in the city library, that was where she felt at home. That's why she went to the library at least twice a week and spent hours there. It was on one of those mornings that she heard a man's voice. Where could they have put that book? Josephine looked up. It was Lord William Hitchcock. He was standing in front of a tall bookshelf, clearly frustrated. "Are you looking for something specific?" asked Josephine. He turned around, surprised, as if he had only just realized someone else was there. "Oh yes, I'm looking for a philosophy book someone recommended to me, Reflections on Human Nature." Josephine stood up, walked over to another shelf, picked up the book, and handed it to him. "Here it is." William's eyes widened. And he said, "I spent 10 minutes looking for this book. Can you believe it?" Josephine shrugged. "Yeah, I come here a lot, so I know most of it pretty well." He smiled. "So, should I thank the expert?" She just nodded and went back to her desk. But he didn't leave and sat down next to her. "May I ask your name?" "My name's Josephine Kingston." "Thank you very much, Miss Kingston. You're really quick and efficient." She smiled. After that day, something curious started to happen. William kept coming back to the library and always seemed to find Josephine there. Sometimes she was already reading, sometimes she arrived just after he did. The conversation started naturally, first about books, then about ideas, then about everything. William discovered that Josephine had a quick and observant mind. Josephine found out that William was much smarter than he seemed at the balls. And without realizing it, they started meeting twice a week at the library, always talking and laughing together. Josephine had never had a friendship like this with a man before, and little by little, her heart started to get involved. As the weeks went by, Josephine began to notice something dangerous. She looked forward to their meetings, to hearing his voice, to his laughter, and when he smiled at her, her heart would race. Josephine had never felt that way before and didn't quite know what to do with those feelings. One afternoon, they were laughing about a funny passage from a book. William shook his head and said, "Josephine, I love our conversations." She smiled, and then he said casually, "You're like a sister to me." Josephine's world seemed to stop. Josephine kept smiling, but something inside her broke. She managed to keep the conversation going, managed to say goodbye and leave the library, but when she got home, the tears came. It turns out that on that day, while they were talking in the library, her sister Charlotte walked right by on her way to the bakery and saw the two of them laughing through the big library window. Later that same night, she found Josephine crying in a room. Charlotte leaned against the door. "I thought I must have been mistaken about what I saw earlier, but it looks like it's true." Josephine didn't answer. Charlotte then laughed. "Did you really think he would be interested in you?" Josephine wiped away her tears. "That's none of your business." In the following weeks, Josephine didn't go back to the library. The first week, it was out of sheer necessity. She knew that if she saw him again, she might not be able to hide how she felt. That sentence still echoed in her mind. "You're like a sister to me." But Josephine didn't blame him. William had been kind and honest, and he said those words in the most loving way possible. He had no idea what effect it would have on her, but it still hurt. That's why she decided to distance herself. She spent more time at home reading, walking in the garden, and helping organize the family's small library. But while Josephine spent those weeks in silence, Charlotte was doing exactly the opposite. She was determined. If Josephine had managed to catch William Hitchcock's attention just by talking to him, then Charlotte would do something much more effective. She was willing to charm him and prove once and for all that she was the true star of the family. Charlotte's first move happened at Countess Harrow's spring ball. Charlotte spent hours getting ready. Her dress was gold, with delicate embroidery that sparkled under the candlelight. Her hair was perfectly styled. When she entered the ballroom, several people turned to look. Charlotte loved that moment. But that night, there was only one person who really mattered: Lord William Hitchcock. He was talking with a few gentlemen when Charlotte approached. "Lord Hitchcock." He turned politely. "Miss Kingston." Charlotte smiled in a calculated way. "I believe we haven't had the chance to dance yet this season." William nodded and said, "It would be a pleasure." And as they danced, Charlotte did exactly what she knew how to do best. She laughed, lightly touched his arm, offered subtle compliments, but there was something odd. William was polite, but he didn't seem interested, and at a certain point during the dance, William Hitchcock leaned in a little closer to Charlotte, just enough so his voice wouldn't be overheard by the curious onlookers around them. "Lady Charlotte," he said with impeccable manners. "Forgive me for asking, but is your sister all right? I haven't seen her in the library." Charlotte couldn't believe what she had just heard. She blinked a few times, as if trying to wake up from a nightmare. She had expected many questions that night, about her dress, about her beauty, about her supposed elegance, but not about Josephine. Even so, she recovered quickly. "Oh, Josephine," she replied with a light laugh. "My sister prefers more solitary activities, let's put it that way. I imagine she's busy with some book." William nodded, but his eyes discreetly wandered around the ballroom as if he were looking for someone. Charlotte noticed, and it annoyed her. She squeezed his arm slightly, drawing his attention. "I must admit, I didn't know you were so interested in my sister." William smiled, almost distractedly. "I was just concerned. Your sister and I are friends, and our conversations in the library are very pleasant." Charlotte felt something burning inside her chest. The word pleasant seemed far too small for the way he spoke about her. And then she said, "I hope it's not as pleasant as our dance." William watched her for a moment. His eyes were kind, but there was a clarity there that Charlotte wasn't used to seeing. "In fact, Lady Charlotte, this is a very pleasant moment, but your sister is special. Her mere presence brings peace and comfort." That irritated her deeply, but before Charlotte could retort, The dance ended, he thanked her, and said goodbye. But Charlotte wasn't going to give up that easily. In the days that followed, she started spending time in the library, not because she liked books, far from it, but because she wanted to prove to Josephine that she could win even there. On the first afternoon, she found William alone among the shelves. She approached him with a carefully practiced smile. "Lord Hitchcock, what a coincidence to find you here again." He looked up from his book. "Lady Charlotte, I've decided to start reading too," she said, grabbing a random book from the shelf. Josephine always said the library was fascinating. William tilted his head slightly. "I'm glad to know your sister influenced you." Charlotte sat down at the table across from him. "I have to admit, I prefer conversations to silent pages." She crossed her legs, leaning in gracefully. "Maybe you could recommend something to me, or just talk with me." William closed the book slowly. For a moment, Charlotte thought she had succeeded. But then he asked, "Is your sister doing well?" Charlotte almost let out an irritated sigh. "Josephine?" she said. "She's fine, yes, as always." Every time William said Josephine's name, Charlotte got even more furious. She was used to getting attention easily, but with William, it was like trying to hold water in her hands. He seemed polite, attentive, yet distant. And worst of all, he was interested in her sister. Meanwhile, at home, Josephine couldn't stop thinking about William. Every time she walked past the bookshelves at home, she remembered her conversations with him, their debates about stories, the laughter, the peaceful afternoons. And little by little, something started to change inside her. She wasn't ashamed of who she was. William had been honest, and Josephine respected that. But as much as she hated to admit it, Charlotte was right about one thing. Josephine had never really tried that world. She'd never tried to make conversation, never tried to dance, never tried to be noticed. Not out of insecurity, but because she always believed it wasn't worth the effort. But maybe, just maybe, it was time to turn the page. And so, a few days later, Josephine Kingston walked into the sewing room of the house. The seamstress maid almost dropped her needles. "Miss?" Josephine smiled softly. "I'd like to try on some dresses." The next ball would be at Josephine's family mansion, and she decided she wanted to do things differently this time. She decided to get ready. And then the big night of the ball arrived. The mansion was lit up like a sky full of stars. Charlotte, as always, was the first to come down the stairs. Magnificent. Feathers, lace, over-the-top sparkle. She expected to be the center of attention, but suddenly, Josephine appeared at the top of the stairs. At that moment, the whole ballroom seemed to change its rhythm. Josephine was simply stunning. Her dress was baby pink with embroidery and a shimmer that caught the candlelight. The bodice was delicately fitted, gracefully accentuating her waist. On her hands, Josephine wore long white satin gloves that reached just above her elbows. Her hair, which was usually tied up simply, had been carefully styled. Among the strands, tiny, subtle pearls were pinned, catching the candlelight in the ballroom whenever she moved. On her face, she wore especially beautiful makeup, with a light rosy blush on her cheeks that brought out her natural complexion, a soft shine on her lips, almost the color of rose petals, and her eyes, those attentive reader's eyes, were subtly highlighted, making them seem even deeper and more luminous. Charlotte, seeing that scene, froze. She almost fainted. Jealousy filled her chest. And when William Hitchcock saw her cross the ballroom that night, he didn't just think she was beautiful. He had this strange and unexpected feeling that he had never really seen Josephine before. He had never truly seen her before. He excused himself from the men he was talking to and crossed the ballroom. "Lady Josephine, Lord William." He then smiled and said, "Would you give me the pleasure of this dance?" And she replied, "Of course." They then began to dance. William was enchanted, and then he said, "I have to admit, I'm trying to figure something out." Josephine looked at him and said, "What?" He smiled softly. "How is it possible that I've been going to the same balls as you for years and never really paid attention?" Josephine calmly replied, "Because I never wanted to draw attention. And then he continued, in a slightly more serious tone, "Actually, Josephine, there's something I wanted to tell you." Josephine noticed the change in his voice. "Go ahead." William took a deep breath. "I've really missed you these past few weeks. The library felt strangely quiet without you there to correct me about authors and debate stories." Josephine laughed. "I missed you too. They took a few more steps in the dance." Then William grew a bit more serious. "Josephine, about what I said that afternoon?" Josephine interrupted him then. "William, you don't have to." "Yes, I do," he continued. "When I told you that I thought of you like a sister, I realized later that I used the wrong words." Josephine looked at him, surprised. "Wrong words?" William nodded. "Josephine, I have a very special affection for you, but I couldn't find the words to say how much I love your company and—" But before he could finish the sentence, something suddenly happened. Josephine immediately felt the cold liquid running down her dress. Her sister, overcome with anger, deliberately bumped into Josephine as she passed by during the dance and spilled her entire glass of wine on Josephine. The red liquid spread all over her baby pink dress. The entire ballroom fell silent. Josephine froze and then, without saying a word, ran out of the ballroom. It took William only a second to understand what had happened, and he ran after her. He found her in the garden, near the rose bushes lit by the moon. Josephine was trying to clean her dress. She was taking deep breaths, trying to keep her composure, but a few silent tears had already escaped. "Josephine." She turned her face away. "Lord Hitchcock, you didn't have to come." He walked over to her. "Of course I did. I care about you, and I won't let you run away from me anymore." She let out a small sigh. "I just didn't want to cause any more embarrassment." William looked at the stained dress and then looked back at her. "The only embarrassment in that room was caused by your sister." Josephine remained silent. William then gently took a handkerchief from his coat pocket and handed it to her. "Here." For a few seconds, the two of them stood in silence. Only the distant sound of music and the rustling of the garden leaves could be heard. And then William spoke again. "I didn't finish saying what I was telling you in there." Josephine took a deep breath. "William, you don't have to explain to me." "Yes, I do," he said. And then he took a step toward her. "I've missed you so much these past few weeks. Not just our conversations. I've missed you. When you disappeared from the library, I realized how much I looked forward to seeing you every week. And tonight, when I saw you walk into that hall," William then smiled and finished, "it was like I was seeing you for the first time." Josephine felt her heart race. "Maybe it's because I'm different now." He shook his head. "No, it's not just that." He took another step toward her. Now, they were very close. "You've always been this way. I'm the one who took too long to realize it. Miss Josephine Kingston, I love you. Not as my sister or just as my friend, but I want you to be my wife." The garden seemed completely silent now, as if even the wind was waiting for Josephine's answer. Her eyes were filled with tears, but now they were tears of emotion. William went on, more softly. "I know, Josephine, that this might seem sudden, and that maybe I was a complete fool for not realizing it sooner." He smiled slightly, almost embarrassed. "But if there's any chance at all that you might feel something similar, Yes, I accept." Josephine answered him excitedly. Her heart could barely contain such happiness. The anguish she had felt for weeks had simply turned into the happiest moment of her life. William let out a low laugh, full of relief and happiness, as if a huge weight had been lifted from his shoulders. He ran his hand through her hair, still trying to believe it. "So, Miss Josephine Kingston just agreed to marry me?" "Yes, I said yes." And they shared a long, passionate kiss. William then looked at her with a mischievous smile in his eyes. "You know what?" Josephine raised an eyebrow. "What?" He reached out his hand to her again and said, "The music is still playing." Josephine looked toward the mansion, then looked back at him. "I can't go back like this." William looked at the stained dress and shrugged. In my opinion, this just proves that tonight is already the most memorable night in the history of balls. Josephine laughed. William then gave her a small bow and said, Miss Kingston, or should I say, my future wife, would you do me the honor of one more dance? Josephine then placed her hand in his, and they returned to the ballroom. Some people, seeing the scene, whispered among themselves. Others watched in surprise. And on the other side of the ballroom, Lady Charlotte Kingston stood completely still. Her eyes were wide open because William hadn't just come back with Josephine, he came back holding her hand. The music then started up again. William led Josephine to the center of the dance floor, and as they began to dance, the beautiful pink dress, even though it was stained, swirled gracefully around the ballroom. But now, no one was looking at the stain anymore. Everyone was looking at him. As they danced, William leaned in slightly and whispered in her ear, By the way, Josephine looked up at him. Yes, he smiled then. As soon as this ball is over, I'll need to speak with your father. Josephine felt her heart race. Yeah, I figured you would. William spun her around once more, elegantly. He guided her carefully, but his eyes never left hers, as if he had finally found exactly where he wanted to be. And so, between readings, laughter, and dance steps, the beautiful love story of Lady Josephine Kingston and Lord William Hitchcock began. A love story that from then on would not be watched from afar, but lived page by page.